So the OKC Thunder may currently be the most confusing team in the NBA. If it's not them, it's the New Orleans Pelicans. So, OKC lost their first 4 games. 2 of them they had Westbrook. And then they have rattled off, 7 wins in a row, with the last 2 of them being without Russell, including last night where they blew out the Houston Rockets. And I think the biggest thing with OKC right now is their abilities to actually defend without Andre Robertson. It's been said a million times. When they had Robertson last year, they were great. Once they lost him, they became average. But they have been awesome on defense this season, and I think a lot of it is Paul George, Steven Adams, and Jeremy Grant. 3 really tall dudes, specifically with Grant and George, because, their height makes more of a difference because they're on the wing. Just overwhelming ball handlers, making it very difficult to throw passes against this team. I mean, the Thunder are leading the league in steals per game at 11.5. I mean, they're number 1 by a pretty decent margin right now over the Grizzlies. They're also mid-tier in blocks per game. And one thing I've noticed with their defense is it seems like they're a little more aggressive, where Steven Adams, maybe a little bit more than he has in the past, will switch on to ball handlers or try to blow up the pick and roll. And because there's just so many tall dudes on this team, I mean, Terrence Ferguson is another one, and the activity of the team just overall has been pretty good, and Patrick Patterson is still not bad, I guess. It's been good enough to where just teams are having a really difficult time scoring against these guys. Some more credit to Jeremy Grant as well. I think a lot of people were always pointing out how good he can be defensively, and I mean, he's definitely been good in the past, but I think he's been a little inconsistent at times. However, it seems this season Grant is just taking another stride towards being the player that people think he can be, which is, just a defensive force, kinda. I mean, his wingspan, I don't have it in front of me, but I know it's really, really long for someone who's 6'8". He's a good athlete, of course, and there are times when he'll just make athletic plays. And then when you have Paul George who can do a similar thing, I mean, it's really difficult to deal with. Those 3 together, Paul George, Steven Adams, Jeremy Grant, their defensive rating is 102. It even gets a little better once you start putting in Terrence Ferguson and all that. I'm just looking at 3-man lineups. I mean, there's a decent chance that Terrence Ferguson and Jeremy Grant are a part of those great defensive units that the Thunder are throwing out there. Also, kudos to Terrence Ferguson. He's getting minutes, and yeah, his offensive game might be a little bit of a process. He's a willing shooter. Whether it's going to go in all the time is a different question. But what is he, 6'7", and he can jump really damn high, and I mean, he's been able to survive out there, right? And also, I think you have to give kudos to Nerlens Noel. His defense so far has been pretty okay. He's been way more disciplined than he was with the Mavericks, where he was trying to prove to everybody that he was worth more than $17 million a year. And I mean, he doesn't play too much. It's about 14 minutes a game when Steven Adams isn't in. But when was the last time the Thunder had a decent backup big to help out the minutes when Steven Adams wasn't playing, I mean, you could say Enes Kanter of 2 years ago, but, when you go to Kanter over Stevens, or Steven, the defense, of course, drops off a little bit. Whereas with Nerlens, he's been able to maintain it, so that's pretty good. I'm not all the way convinced that Nerlens is going to do that all season, but he's earned at least enough trust to keep on getting minutes right now, and that's definitely progress. And I think the other thing this says, and I'll get to offense in a moment here, but I think one thing this says is the Thunder may have corrected what has been perhaps their biggest problem the past couple of seasons, which is the moment they start shuffling lineups around, the team falls apart. A lot of the time it's been because of Westbrook, right? You take Westbrook out, and as Zach Lowe says, we might as well just hold on to the ball for 24 seconds so we can set our defense on the other end. I mean, it would be that bad. And without Westbrook, they've shown enough respectable stuff to where they look good. They look pretty good. Now we can move over to offense. And, you know, talking about how they've been able to actually hold up without Westbrook, got to give some credit to Dennis Schroeder. I don't think he's been, like, particularly amazing. Like, his efficiency has been still pretty rough, and I think if you watch them, there are definitely times when he doesn't see the occasional teammate that's open or whatever, but it's still way better than everything else that they've had at the point guard position outside of Westbrook for a pretty long time now. And actually, you could say that the last few games, Schroeder has been very good for them. I think a lot of it is because he could just be going to the rim a little bit more. He's had a couple of games where he's shot nearly 10 free throws a game. And I think that allows him to be a little more efficient, and defense collapses a little bit more often, and he doesn't just shoot those mid-range jumpers. Yeah, I mean, once Schroeder can go back to his role that he's supposed to be in, which is the backup point guard, and his usage is not as high as it's, you know, had to be here, we could see him having a pretty okay season for OKC. I still have my reservations about the fit overall, but it's been all right so far. What I'm noticing from OKC's offense is, yeah, it's not beautiful. I mean, they're passing the ball about the same as they have the past couple of years, which is basically less than almost everybody else. And their offense is definitely not flowing, and there's not a million handoffs, and there's not a bunch of cuts to the rim and all that. But here's what it is. Number one, there's no more Carmelo Anthony isolations. Number two, they haven't turned the ball over that much. 3, they're grabbing a bunch of offensive rebounds. Steven Adams has been finishing a little better at the rim this year than he has the past couple seasons. I think they've been attacking mismatches more often. And then they're towards the top of the league in free throw attempts. A lot of that being Westbrook, of course. Their turnovers are pretty low as well. They're towards the top of the league in terms of not turning the ball over. And you just put all that into a blender, and what comes out? Well, right now they're the 18th best offense in the league, which is pretty good seeing as you haven't had Westbrook for, 4 games, and you don't have exactly a lot of shooting out there. And Abrinas, who is supposed to be one of your shooters, has not had the best time as of right now. And Terrence Ferguson, who's been attempting quite a few, hasn't really been making them in. So that's kind of like best case scenario, I would say. And you have to believe that if they can maintain those things, and then Westbrook can be good to go, they could be pretty okay on offense. I mean, if you manage to be 18th in offense when Westbrook's not playing all the time, could they get to like number 11 and then still be this top 5 defense, even without Andre Robertson, and then Robertson comes back and then nobody can score on them ever? They look pretty good, I would say. Now, I would not consider the teams they've beaten to be exactly murderer's row. I mean, they had the Suns, the Wizards, the Cavs, but, you know, they beat the Rockets last night, they beat the Pelicans, and I know the Pelicans are in a little bit of a skid, but Anthony Davis was playing. They also beat the Clippers and the Hornets, and both of those teams are respectable, so yeah, I think OKC is looking all right. And given the Western Conference, which is in a little bit of flux right now, where a couple teams are maybe not playing as well, I mean, outside of the Nuggets and the Blazers, it's a whole lot of like, how good really is this team? Well, them and the Warriors, of course. So, yeah, perhaps OKC has put themselves a little bit above everybody else. It's a long season, but these guys have already managed to look like 4 different teams, where they lose the first 4, 2 of them with Westbrook, and we're thinking, oh crap, here we go. The offense is terrible. They can't defend well enough without Robertson, but they have turned the page, and we'll see what they do from here. I think they need to trade for Kyle Korver, okay? Because right now, how many minutes is Abrinas playing? He's playing 22. Just give Korver like all of Abrinas' minutes, because their defense is basically the same, and then offensively, of course, Korver is way better, and that could be pretty big for him. Or not him, someone like Courtney Lee could be pretty alright. There were rumors of that happening in the offseason, and I guess it was pretty close to happening, and then it didn't. So yeah. One more thing before I get out of here. Props to Raymond Felton, who is looking the best he has looked since 1998, when The Undertaker threw Mankind off Hell in a Cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table.